The MVSx is a $500 arcade emulation machine that comes with around 50 Neo Geo games preloaded. It's meant to replicate the true Neo Geo arcade experience, which many people, including myself, feel is one of the most enjoyable ways to play these games. While most things with the name Neo Geo in the title cost a lot more than this, it's still pretty expensive, so let's take a look and see if the performance justifies the cost. Unlike many of the other 3/4 sized arcade machines, the MVSx comes fully assembled right out of the box, making it a true plug-and-play solution. I didn't have a stand to test, but I believe those require assembly, but at least you don't have to put this together. The cabinet itself is shaped like an original Neo Geo MVS with replaceable marquees. One inexplicably has a picture of Ronald McDonald on it, which just seems like a legal issue. It's also got 2 speakers in front, as well as fake coin buttons. I really wish they'd put a little more thought into this, and maybe did something creative, like have the coin return button actually be what inserts coins in the games, and where the actual coins would insert, maybe put USB ports so people could use external controllers. The control panel itself is in a 6-button layout, more on that in a bit, and uses arcade parts that are bolted in from the bottom. Serious arcade gamers will probably want to change these out with their favorites, and might even drill holes through the top to better secure the stick. On top of the control panel is left player start, a button to toggle the options menu, something called select game, which is actually just the insert coin button. Then there's a right player start and the volume knob. In back is just a clean rear panel, and then ports for DC power, USB firmware updates, and a power button. Now, the only real term set when I was borrowing this review unit was that I wasn't allowed to show video or pictures of the insides, but they didn't say I couldn't talk about it, so I'll run through kind of how it's set up and how it looks. That back port that I just showed was only the USB and power interface, and that looked like basically a pass-through board to the main interface. And also underneath the control panel was just a bunch of very clean wiring to another breakout board that then went directly into what I thought was the main emulation board. Now, unfortunately, whoever had this review unit before me stripped out the screws so badly that there's absolutely no way I could get the metal plate off without breaking it to get to the actual motherboard inside. But it's very small. It's about the same size board that you'd find in the mini consoles, and that's bolted directly to the back of the LCD panel itself, which I believe is a 5:4 aspect ratio panel, but as you'll see soon, it shows the image in a 4:3 setup. So I'm very happy that it came already assembled, because that was one of my big gripes of the arcade 1-up, is that if you have to spend time assembling and putting something together, maybe you would want to apply that time spent to building a better quality arcade machine. Most people wouldn't, just putting that out there though. Whereas this design, you just take it right out of the box and it starts working. However, it does seem like it would be a little more challenging to get to the buttons and stick in order to replace them. You'd have to go in from the back, at least I think. I didn't try disassembling it from the sides, but it appears that you'd have to go in from the back and kind of reach in, which should be fine for buttons, but might be a little trickier if you needed to switch out the stick. But overall, it seemed to be pretty decent build quality, so now let's take a look at how it actually works. The main interface is pretty nice, showing the box art from all the games. If you'd like detailed info on every single option, Console Kits and RetroRalph were the first to get the MVSx and have detailed videos showing all the options. I recommend checking those out, but I'll quickly go over the options here. Going to the settings icon allows you to select from quite a few different languages, which is always cool. Game mode allows you to play the games in either their MVS Arcade or AES Home versions. Game image shows different scanline filters. We'll come back to this in a second. System allows you to do a factory reset and is the menu that you'll use to update your firmware. Once the game's loaded, the options available are a bit different than what we just saw. This menu allows you to save and restore states in the game, which is something most emulation users are probably already familiar with. Then there's the controller settings that allow you to select different button combos. You could assign buttons to each of the 6 available. At first I was confused about why you'd want to do this, but we go over this later and it actually makes sense. Then there's the setting to enable or disable violence in the game. Clearly you want this on. From there, you could either hit B to back out of all the menus and return to the game, or go up to the exit option to leave the game and return to the main game select menu. Okay, now let's take a look at the video modes. The first option is a pixel-perfect 4x3 mode that's the default mode. Honestly, it looks great, and the LCD panel isn't terrible. There's some light bleed around the edges, but nothing too bad. You get some black borders in this mode, but it's totally worth it because the image really does look good. Then there's the pixel scanline option, which looks great if you're into fake scanlines. Now it gets really weird. There's a mode called smooth scaling, which has the same effect the RetroTink smoothing filter has. This is awesome for 3D games, but really ruins the look of the Neo Geo's 2D library. It's cool that the image is scaled to fit the screen, but the smoothing just ruins it. What makes this worse is every other option has this filter enabled as well. H scanning line is filter on plus scan lines. V scanning is filter on plus vertical scan lines, which makes zero sense, unless maybe you want to experience what it might have been like to play Neo Geo games vertically, but still horizontal? Lastly, 40-degree scanning lines has angled scan lines, and this actually might be a neat option, but the filter is on this mode too. Maybe the angled scan lines would kinda give it the sense of a shadow mask look, but I really just can't tell with that filter on it. So overall, either leave this at the default setting or the first scanline option. Everything else is just too weird, at least on this firmware revision. One of the most important factors in both emulation and flat panel displays is how much lag they add. I wanted to get some solid measurements as to how much total lag the MVSx added over original hardware, so I set up a test using a 960 frame per second slow motion camera and an LED wired to the button. I ran the test on both my MVSx and my mini MVSx arcade machine that has a CRT and real hardware. Each frame of a 960 frame per second camera represents just about 1 millisecond, so by counting the frames between when the mini MVS reacted versus when the MVSx reacted, will give us a pretty decent measurement of added lag. Now, this test can vary even on real hardware, but emulation latency is a much wider swing. As you can see here, we're seeing latency between 26 and 40 milliseconds, which is between 1.5 and 2.5 frames of lag. In contrast, something like the Genesis Mini ranged between 3 and 7 frames of lag. Now, I didn't have time to test 100 different measurements, but overall, it seems that the lag of the MVSx seems low and didn't seem to vary too much. There's always a chance that you'll get a glitch here and there, but as far as emulation boxes goes, this seems to be pretty good. So even though I had spent the time to take all of these measurements, I also wanted to have some real-world performance testing, and while I'm pretty confident in my ability to diagnose certain consoles, I don't have as much experience with the arcade stuff as some of my other friends, so I asked my friend Beast to come over and try it out, and I also made sure that he didn't actually play the console until I hit record on the camera so that we can get his actual first impressions of the machine. So we played around with the interface a little bit, but I wanted to both talk with him about it, have him play it, and really just get his first impressions and thoughts from somebody that had never played the console before. So here we go. Are your moves going in fine? Any issues?
A little bit of latency, just a tad bit. It could also be I'm not too keen on the joystick.
The joystick felt a little plasticky to me.
Yeah. But the buttons are surprisingly fine. Okay.
How about the button layout? Is it okay that it's in the 6-button layout?
Yeah, I actually prefer this because in case someone else wants to play, there's several players out there that actually play box style.
Oh, right.
Especially for certain KOF games.
Now, how do you think the sound effects as opposed to the background music are? Is it off or is it...
Slightly.
That's what I thought too. But that could also just be the speaker. Sometimes full range speakers versus treble speakers.
But for example, the crowd audio, like when you hear the crowd cheering, it's okay. pretty solid.
So far, does it move around a lot, or is it pretty sturdy on the table?
It's pretty sturdy.
Cool. At one point, we thought we found a bug, but it just seems like an issue with the left player stick. This demo unit did have some abuse on it, and the issues appeared to be hardware and stick related, not related to the emulation of the machine.
I can't do Power Geyser on one side, but I can do it on the opposite. I can't do Burn Knuckle after that, so Power Geyser. Okay, I can do it one way. I can do it the other way, but I can't do it on the player one side. It's weird. I hope so.
I wanted Beast to play on original hardware to compare the experience, but I didn't want to go straight to a CRT cabinet. I thought a more fair comparison would be to have an original motherboard and game on a low-lag flat panel monitor, in hopes that we'd only be factoring in emulation latency and not both that and flat panel latency. So, I mean, I'm just looking, I'm certainly not an expert in this game, but it seems like you're a few people deep on the MVSx, you're a few people deep here. You seem to have an easier time winning on this one.
Yeah, it's the joystick, really.
The joystick more than the latency, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. And, of course, I wanted him to play on my mini MVS, which is a pretty close experience to a real MVS machine. So on the mini MVS, you have CRT, original hardware, original games, and everything like that. But these are, once again, not the stick that you prefer the best. But it is the buttons that you prefer, right? So how does this feel versus the MVSx?
Well, we're talking one-to-one with the arcade as a whole. I prefer playing like this or via Supergun. And my combos are coming out fine.
Is that the biggest difference that you could tell between this and any emulation, is how easy it is for you to do combos?
Yeah. It's because I've played these in the arcade so much, and then finally getting a Supergun and then playing at home to refine it. And of course, playing, when you travel and you go to, different countries and you end up playing on their setups. Playing on a CRT setup is the best thing, in my opinion. There's no input lag on this, which is perfect. I'm not a fan of the joystick, but the buttons I'm in love with. Compared to the MVSx, the only general thing that would need replacing is just the joysticks.
All right, I think that's a totally fair thing to talk about in any gaming setup, that you're already used to your own joystick. And I from the looks of it, it seems like you could replace the sticks and everything on the MVSx. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty cool. All right, so your final thoughts on this, right? Because I really wanted you here to give it an actual player's opinion. Mm-hmm. Because very often I get sucked into these measurements, and I could kind of describe what it's like to have variable lag, but if lag's really solid, sometimes it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, you got two mini consoles here, both with sticks that aren't your favorite. So there should be an actually pretty fair comparison of what this feels like versus what this feels like.
Right.
So what's your thoughts?
As long as we're able to switch the joysticks themselves, mm-hmm. I think all the problems would be neutralized as a whole.
Okay. So the look of the MVSx, while, hardcore gamers want the CRT, it was nothing wrong with that. No. I certainly didn't feel like there was anything wrong with this at all.
Yeah, and crazily enough, this is actually pixel perfect.
Yeah, it is.
As long as you set it to
the first setting.
Very first setting on pixel, it's actually pixel perfect.
Yeah.
Which I definitely appreciate.
Me too, 100%. You do, as you can see, you have some black bars in the top and the bottom.
And the bottom, yep.
I couldn't give a shit. All I care about is that the characters don't look squished or smushed or stretched or something like that.
Yep. And audio quality, it's a little bit compressed. The audio is definitely compressed. That's another thing.
Yeah, so this has got two speakers in here in front, and it didn't sound nearly as good as one $20 speaker in the mini MVS.
Right. Yeah, that's Honestly, that's my only complaint. Little bit of input lag, but you can adjust over time.
So it wasn't too variable.
Right.
Because that's the thing that kills retro gaming is when you're playing and every time you go to do a special move, now it's 3 frames of lag, now it's 7 frames of lag, now it's 1 frame of lag. That is murder. Whereas if it's always, let's just say 3 frames, always 4 frames, especially when you have a low lag screen, it's not as bad. You can adjust to it, and that's what you felt. You felt like you got your moves through.
Yeah. Like I said, I was only having issues, specifically in Fatal Fury, when doing Terry's Power Geyser, which is half circle back and then quarter circle back, half circle forward into B plus C, which is light kick and heavy punch. I wasn't able to get it facing right, but I was able to get it facing left. That's only due to error on the joystick side.
So this particular review unit has gone through 4 people now, and I hope that they used it hard. I hope that this had the right kind of abuse, but that also for 4 reviewers in the past month, if that stick has already given you issues, then I wonder how long it would last with a pro gamer from day one. Yeah, probably less time than this.
For the casual heads, I say it's 100% viable, especially if you're experiencing the Neo Geo library for the first time.
Now you have the setting that I always talk about. Neo Geo, for me personally, always felt like an arcade game. So you're here.
Especially since they actually set up the big red layout perfectly. Some players are going to have issues with the layout just because of the fact that it's 6 buttons. However, many of the players will prefer to play box style layout where A, B, C, D. Or if you're one of those weirdos that prefers playing Neo Geo CD button layout where it's A, B, C, D, where A and B are the bottoms and C and D are the top. If you're one of those weirdos, it's okay.
It's a judgment-free review.
I'm still friends with you. It's 100% okay. But if you're a metal slug head, you're definitely going to want to map A, B, and C to the top 3 for the utmost convenience, especially with the sports games included, such as Baseball Stars and the football frenzy.
Right. So it's funny because when I first saw the pictures of this, my criticisms were that, like, what's with the 6-button layout? That seems stupid. But it turns out that I was wrong because the correct layout would be 1, 2, 3, 4 box style. So if you wanted to limit it to Neo Geo only, you would have that 6th button disappear. But that's way sillier. You might as well just leave this. And while I wasn't allowed to take this apart for the review, there's got to be a way to hack it at some point or another. I mean, we're nerds, right?
Absolutely.
A group of nerds versus one company's programming. This thing's getting hacked at some point. No offense whatsoever to anybody listening, but so that's cool. Now you will have another use for the 6 buttons, but I'm really glad to know that there's actually different ways to configure this that are 100% Neo Geo related.
One more thing, if you own a Neo, I think it's a 17 or a 19, and you're definitely one of those weirdos that actually prefers where A, B, C, D are on the bottom and D hangs on the top.
Oh.
I hope you are not the type to put the milk in the cereal bowl first before the cereal.
Well, this is a judgment-free review, but that's also now you've justified the 6th button not just for OCD layout, but there is another specific reason why people would want that. So, look, I never have a problem admitting when I'm wrong. I'm wrong very often, and I was definitely wrong about the button layout thing because you just gave a couple of very legitimate reasons why true Neo Geo fans would actually want it laid out like this.
And more than likely, the Neo Geo fans are obviously going to opt to change the joysticks around, whether it be Sanwa, whether it be Hop, IL. Maybe people want to use the Crown joysticks, the Korean joysticks.
Good point.
Those things are actually really good too, especially with the tension on the center stick, especially for fighters. Really good.
So the only hesitation left in this then, $500 price point. Yeah.
My only concern is the library. The library of games included does not match the price value. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I would have really appreciated if they would have included more of the oddball titles, like some of the stuff on the Visco lineup, such as your Neo Drift Out, your Magical Drop,
right?
And my personal favorite, Super Dodgeball. But I understand that's an
game.
Arc System Works layout. That's an Arc System Works title. I get it. But still, if you would have included a couple of more Visco titles, maybe Cross Swords, maybe Burning Fight, it's still under the SNK / Takara license.
Yeah. And you know, to address the people that always have a different opinion on this, like, yes, you can get a Raspberry Pi and plug it into a flat screen.
You can also use a Mister.
You can also use the Mister. If you want original hardware, you can grab a cheap board off of eBay. You can get a 161 in one cart. Make sure it's not the one with the bad voltage. You don't want to blow anything up. You know, you could get a quality cheap super gun for $50 now. Cyril makes one. T's working on one, and you know the minigun's fairly inexpensive.
And you have the recently consoleized Behar Bros. CMVS.
Absolutely. So if you're a tinkerer, you could get a large library of Neo Geo games with no lag on whatever screen you want it. But so many people, and I mean this respectfully, but so many people either aren't tinkerers or they just don't have the time. Some people are perfectly capable of doing all of this stuff, even the technical soldering, but they work a lot. They got families, and it's like, look, I saved up some money. Can't I just have something delivered that I could take out of the box and plug in? So that I would understand. My only hesitation is, though, the arcade one-ups, they're able to sell those. You know, you find them on Walmart for $200 on average for a decent one.
Mm-hmm.
I hope this happens with this. $500 is a lot of money. I love the fact that you don't have to worry about things like the mini MVS had to be built from scratch. It had to be gutted. You know, there's still CRT issues because there's always CRT issues.
And there's an MV1C inside of the mini.
Right. And whereas this one, everything looks perfect. You know, everything just works out of the box. And if you're a hardcore gamer, you're probably going to beat up that stick. But if you're a hardcore gamer, you probably already know how to replace a stick.
Yep. So
I'm still mixed on the price. But overall, I did not expect to be as happy with the MVSx as I was.
Yep. Just to add on, just the addition of a couple of brand new sticks, perfectly fine. But the library, it's the library for me that kind of doesn't necessarily justify the $500 plus price point.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming over and doing this. I'm glad that this is Beast approved. I think overall, you know, the sticks could be better. The speakers, either the speakers or the audio emulation could be better. Hopefully it's just the speakers, but it's not a dud.
Absolutely not.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys next time.